Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Allen. Welcome to Adventures in Dolls, the United Federation of Doll Clubs YouTube channel. Today, our program is part 2 of our Schoenhut presentation by Barbara Stone. If you're new to our channel, welcome. If you're returning, we invite you to leave us a comment in the comment section below. And be sure you like and subscribe. So you don't miss your next adventure in dolls. And now let's look at Schoenhut Part 2 by Barbara Stone.
Hi, I'm Barbara Stone. It's my pleasure to be able to talk to you today about my favorite dolls, the Schoenhuts. In part 1 of this series, we talked about the Schoenhut Company, which was started in 1872 in Philadelphia by Albert Schoenhut, a young German immigrant from a wooden toy making family. The company initially made wooden toys, but in 1911 introduced a doll line of wooden dolls with unique steel springs, which quickly earned them the reputation for being unbreakable. In part 1, we looked at the company's line of wooden child dolls, but they also made infant and toddler dolls, which is what we'll talk about here today. Perhaps this series has inspired you to want to buy your first, or maybe your 61st Schoenhut doll. If so, we'll also explore the where, when, and how to accomplish that. But first, a trip through the Schoenhut nursery. So far, we've been looking at Schoenhut's child dolls. Among the company's creations is a charming nursery of babies and toddlers. Let's take a look at them now. In their very first doll line, the company advertised 2 infants, Tootsie Wootsie and Schnickel Fritz, produced from 1911 through 1912. Tootsie Wootsie, shown here, looks like a baby, but with a toddler body. He's equally happy doing a handstand or sitting quietly with his papier-mâché toy. Tootsie was sold in a somewhat fancy baby gown, which has led some people to think he was meant to be a girl. But at that time, boys and girls wore dresses until they were 6 or 7 years old, because it made changing diapers easier. So Tootsie can be a boy or a girl. Let the child use their imagination and let them make that choice. Tootsie is on a fully jointed toddler body. Since infants can be considered children anywhere from birth to 1 year old, and many children are walking by their first birthday, the use of the toddler body places them towards the end of the timeline defined by the word infant. He can stand on his head, and because of his steel spring jointing, once balanced, he can hold that pose indefinitely. And here's Schnickel Fritz, the second Schoenhut infant. Again, you'll notice that the original infants were not really babies. They were on child bodies, and they look more like active toddlers. Well, Tootsie Wootsie could be either a boy or a girl. Schnickel Fritz is an active toddler boy who can never be mistaken for a girl. Unlike the Schnickel Fritz we just looked at, whose finish is all original, this Schnickel Fritz has been completely repainted. I don't know who did the repaint. I love my all-original one, but I love this one as well, because I can use him as my travel doll. I'm always worried about traveling with an all-original doll, but not so much with a doll that's been repainted. If he acts up and gets his nose bumped, which of course I try very hard not to let happen, his repaint can be repainted. Doesn't he look in the picture on the left as though he really enjoys traveling? In this case, he was on his way to UFDC headquarters in Kansas City, where he really enjoyed visiting the UFDC museum. Tootsie Wootsie and Snickle Fritz didn't look like infants, but in 1913 the company began making babies that did. These infant dolls' heads were sculpted by Albert's son, Harry E. Schoenhut, in the baby likeness of Albert's grandson, William F. Schoenhut, who was born in 1911. The babies are models 107 and 108, which are based on the same design but came in different sizes. They were made from 1913 until 1923 in sizes ranging from the smallest 11-inch to the largest 17-inch. Three basic Schoenhut wooden bodies used on their infant dolls are shown here. On the left is the bent limb baby body with nature arms and legs. This body is spring-jointed at the arms and legs. Schoenhut realized that the nature limb body construction was less complicated and less costly than their classic jointed toddler body. In the middle is the classic Schoenhut toddler body, jointed at the elbows, wrists, hips, knees, and ankles. On the right is the walker body with nature arms. The straight legs swing from the hips to simulate walking. All three body types came in various sizes, with wigs or painted hair. Model 107 was made in 11, 13, and 14-inch sizes. Here's a 13-inch Model 107 with a nature body, who's enjoying being held by big sister 22-inch Miss Dolly. Note that while the first Schoenhut babies were given names, Tootsie Wootsie and Snickle Fritz, all but one other of their dolls, Miss Dolly shown here, were listed only by a model number preceded by the height of the doll in inches. So this baby's full model designation is Model 13/107. Again, the company believed in play and imagination, so children should be the one to give their dolls names. And, while based on the head of William F. Schoenhut, the doll's gender was not specified, so that children could determine if their doll was a boy or a girl. These twin 14-inch Model 107s, with Barney Google, one of Schoenhut's comic characters, show that they are just as cute as girls or boys. These Schoenhut boys have had a successful day of fishing. The smaller ones are Schoenhut's 11 and 14-inch Model 107s. Big Brother is a 16-inch Model 205. Joining them is their pet pug Mopsy by Steve. 11 inches is the smallest size infant doll made by Schoenhut. Here are a gaggle of them, and once again showing that especially the wigged ones are equally charming as boys or girls. This little 11-inch Model 107 is nestled on the lap of her big sister, 19-inch Schoenhut Model 308. Model 108 is a larger, more detailed version of Model 107 and only came in 15 and 17-inch sizes, and of course came in bent limb and fully jointed bodies with wigs or painted hair. On the left are two sweet infants, 15-inch Schoenhut Model 108s with bent limb baby bodies, who are enjoying a quiet moment with their favorite stuffed toys. On the right is the wigged Model 308 you saw earlier getting ready to play the Trinity chimes. By the way, wigs on Schoenhuts were always nailed to the heads. If you find a Schoenhut with a glued-on wig, it's an indication that the wig has, at a minimum, been taken off in the past, or more likely is not the original wig. And if you find an infant with painted hair, and you can see patched up nail holes, he probably started life with a wig, and when it wore out or fell off, the owner just painted on some hair. This 17-inch Schoenhut Model 108 has a toddler body and has always had painted hair. He shares his cap with his rocking elephant, so he can show off his nicely painted head. In contrast, this 17-inch Model 108 on the right still has his original wig. 17 inches is the largest of the Model 108s. He's looking very natty, standing at attention in his sailor suit next to his big brother 19-inch Schoenhut Model 405. These Schoenhut infants are dressed in their nautical best, getting ready for Dolly and Me by the Sea, our convention in Baltimore. Clockwise from back left are a 15 and a 17-inch Model 108, a 14-inch Model 107, and an all-bisque reproduction of a Model 107 marked LEDC Mascot 1956, 1981, believed to be from a Lake Erie Doll Club anniversary event. Babies eventually learned to walk, so in 1919 the company introduced their walking dolls. The heads used were those of models 107 and 108, both painted hair and wig versions. Schoenhut's walkers were not the first walkers in the doll world, but most early walking dolls were operated by clockwork. Schoenhut's walkers were operated by the child, not by a mechanism. They featured the nature arms used on the babies, which the child held to propel the legs, which swing from the hips, to achieve a walking motion. Walking was simulated by the doll's straight legs swinging from the hips, with the child guiding the motion by holding the bent limb arms. So once again, the child and the child's imagination were brought into play. Special shoes were designed for the walking dolls, which did not have holes on the bottoms of their feet. To achieve the walking motion, Schoenhut designed special shoes with a slight wedge. The company patented sleep eyes for their infant dolls in 1920. Model 109, which came in 13 and 14 inches tall, and Model 110, 15 and 17 inches tall, had sleep eyes and open mouths with two metal upper teeth. Sleeping eyes for dolls was not a new concept in the doll world, but putting sleeping eyes in a solid wood doll head presented quite a challenge. The challenge was met by hollowing out the wooden heads to contain the sleep eye mechanism and only making them in wigged versions, thereby covering up the seam. The Schoenhut infant model 109 from 1921 is shown here. She measures 13 inches. Her wooden head has been hollowed out to hold the eyes, teeth, and tongue, with the seam covered by the wig. Bent limb baby bodies were the standard for these models. Examples have also been found on the fully jointed toddler bodies and walker bodies, which may have been special orders. Here she is, ready for bed. She's being watched over carefully by Mom, a Model 102, and Dad, a Model 205, both from 1911-1912. This 21-inch Model 110 has a toddler body, sleep eyes, and a red felt tongue. The largest Model 110 listed for sale in their catalog was 17 inches, so this big girl may have been a special order. Another probable special order is this gorgeous 22-inch example of Model 110, with thanks to Joanne Porter for letting me show her to you here today. So-called mama dolls became popular during the 1920s. Their soft stuffed bodies with a voice box in the tummy called out "Mama" to little dolly mothers everywhere. Keeping up with the trends, Schoenhut introduced their stuffed dolls with mama voices in 1924. Instead of a composition head, as used by many other manufacturers, Schoenhut's dolls had wooden heads on a wooden or composition shoulder plate attached to the soft body, as shown here. They were wigged and made only in 14 and 16-inch sizes. Pictured here is a sweet little 14-inch one. And here she is, spending time with her big sister, a 19-inch Model 102. The American doll industry thrived after World War I ended, even with the resumption of bisque-head dolls from such German firms as Kessner and Armin Marseille. Among the imported dolls were wonderful character babies. In America, artist Grace Story Putnam designed an extremely realistic infant doll, the Bilo baby. They were made in Germany and distributed by George Borgfeldt starting in 1922. The Bilo was an instant hit. Early Bilo babies had a bisque head, cloth body, and celluloid hands. Eventually, the heads and hands, and even at times the body, were made in practically every medium by doll manufacturers in Germany, America, Japan, and elsewhere. In 1925, Schoenhut made a Bilo baby. Not just any Bilo, or a less realistic imitation like some other companies, including Armin Marseille's My Dream Baby and Horsman's Tiny Baby, but an exact replica of Grace Story Putnam's. The only major difference being that Schoenhut's Bilos had wooden heads. They were made in very limited quantities, and they were never commercially distributed. All three of these dolls are Bilos. The one in the middle is Grace Story Putnam's, of course. These lovely and rare examples are from the collection of and photographed by Joanne Porter. During the 1920s, composition was rapidly becoming the material of choice for doll manufacturers everywhere. Although composition dolls started to be manufactured in the years right after the turn of the century, they increased in popularity in the 1920s, and they remained popular until replaced by hard plastic in the 1940s. While wood was the Schoenhut Company's forte, their final doll was their composition child, offered for sale in their 1930 catalog. She is a 13-inch tall doll with a body like F&B's very popular Patsy doll. The head can also be found on other Schoenhut body types. This lovely 13-inch example is from the collection of and photographed by Joanne Porter. The composition child offered in the 1930 catalog was the last new doll made by the Albert Schoenhut Company. Like other American businesses in the 1930s, some doll manufacturers did not survive, and sadly, the Schoenhut Company was among those. The company didn't go down without a good fight, but in 1935 it went into bankruptcy, and most of the remaining stock was sold at auction in 1936. This composition child, with her older sister, a 19-inch Model 105, is on a fully jointed toddler body instead of the Patsy-type body. This is probably an indication that the doll was assembled from parts sold at that auction in 1936. In later years, O. Schoenhut Incorporated was formed, and that company produced the wooden pin family dolls designed by Emily Myers in 1935. But that's a story for another time. Unfortunately, sometimes all good things come to an end. The company began to find it harder and harder to compete with the cheaper German and Japanese dolls starting to be imported again in the 1920s. They did not make any dolls after 1928, although they continued to sell existing doll inventory. They also continued to make toys, but eventually the Depression struck the final death blow. The company finally went into bankruptcy in 1935. In February of 1936, a 3-day auction of all remaining inventory took place. When the United States Post Office created the Classic American Doll series in 1997, Schoenhut's Model 16205 and the Bonnet Head doll were chosen for the boy and girl on the Schoenhut stamp. This is really a fitting tribute to be included in the list of only 15 dolls considered to be American classics. I inherited my mother and my aunt's childhood Schoenhuts, shown here. I was born with a doll collection waiting for me, so I've been collecting for 80 years. But the dolls were just play dolls. We just loved dolls. So no A marks or French fashions. I didn't know that these two were Schoenhuts, just that they were dolls. This was long before not just Carol Corson's book, but even before the wonderful Coleman encyclopedias. One day I was looking at a copy of Family Circle magazine, and there was a picture of a doll. The marking on the back of one of the dolls shown was the same as the marks on my two dolls, and that was the first time I knew that I had two Schoenhuts. At that time, I was more interested in collecting the other dolls that are the focus of my collection, Vogue Ginny, the dolls of my childhood. I love Ginny, and she's so easy to find at reasonable prices, so that collection grew by leaps and bounds. But that's a seminar for another day. I searched doll shows, that was in the days before eBay, and was able to find Schoenhuts, but they were always way beyond my young married lady's doll budget. Then came eBay. This is my very first Schoenhut purchase, and Miss Dolly. It was love at first sight. She's totally repainted, but she still has a very charming presence. I was so afraid of losing the bid on her that an hour before the auction ended, I stayed on the computer, refreshing the screen over and over to make sure that I still had the high bid. The Dolly gods were with me that day, and she was mine for something under $200. Although I now have many more Schoenhutts in my collection, rare and certainly more costly, but she still holds a special place in my heart. So, where do you go to find your first or your 61st Schoenhut? Live auctions are the source of a number of my Schoenhutts. Many of my dolls have been won at Theriault's auctions. This includes my favorite carved care girl. I got a happy surprise when I took possession of her. I could not see her feet when I was bidding on her, but she has wonderful original Schoenhut shoes. I could do a whole program on Schoenhut shoes and how difficult to find and expensive to purchase when you do find them. I've also gotten Schoenhutts from Bertoia and other auction houses as well. Many of my Schoenhutts have been bought from dealers, both in person and at a doll show. If you let dealers know that you're a collector, they will keep an eye open for dolls in which you might be interested. Sometimes this means you don't have to be the first person into the UFTC sales room or a doll show, because a dealer will be holding a doll or dolls for you to consider purchasing. Not pictured on this slide, but elsewhere in the program, are Schoenhutts purchased from Becky and Andy Orant. Tootsie Wootsie, just to name one of them. And don't forget that dealers are also on Ruby Lane. My bonnet head doll came from that source. The middle two dolls were purchased from dealers, but not at doll shows. The carved hair in the blue dress from the Graziano period was bought from a dealer, but under slightly unusual circumstances. The doll was entered into competition at a regional, and of course was the blue ribbon winner. I contacted the owner, who happened to be a dealer, and asked if the doll was for sale. She said no, she would never part with it, which I quite understood. But I gave her my card anyhow and said if she ever changed her mind, please contact me. Months went by and I had quite forgotten the incident, but lo and behold, she eventually contacted me and explained that circumstances had changed and she was now needing to sell the doll. My check was quickly in the mail before she could change her mind. The carved hair doll in pink was also purchased from a dealer who advertises in Antique Doll Collector magazine. I was offered this one before they advertised her because they knew I would like her, and they were certainly right. So let dealers know what you're looking for. Last, but certainly not least, is eBay. I've already mentioned that the first Schoenhut I purchased was from eBay. I won my top-notch Schoenhut on eBay, but not without a little help. I have Jonathan Green to thank for this win. He sent me the link to her eBay listing, which didn't come up in my eBay Schoenhut search because nowhere in the title or the description was the word Schoenhut. When buying a Schoenhut, you need to decide on the quality that you're willing to accept. There are vast price differences between mint dolls, retouched dolls, restored dolls, and of course dolls needing restoration. Mint dolls can be very expensive for even a common model number, and restored dolls may also be expensive depending on the artistry of the restorer and the rarity of the doll. If you've purchased a less than mint doll, you need to decide if you want to restore or have restored. I have, of course, purchased restored dolls, for example, my collection of dolls restored by Frank Mahood. In general, unless I can't stand to even look at the doll, I personally wouldn't have it restored. Schoenhut dolls are prone to have bumped noses because they were dolls meant to be played with. I consider those bumped noses to be badges of honor, but this is purely a personal decision that each collector must make for themselves. If you're artistic, a Schoenhut very badly in need of restoration might just be the one for you. One example is the one shown on the right here. These are the before and after pictures of the project doll on the previous slide. For sure, she was badly in need of restoration. She wasn't restored to all her former glory, but she's now a sweet and attractive doll. How do you tell if a doll has been repainted or restored? You really need to purchase a blacklight. At the time of their manufacture, the dolls were painted with paint which contained lead. Paint manufacturers started replacing lead pigments in some paints before World War II, when safer alternatives became available. Blacklight shows areas where lead-free paint has been used. When a blacklight is shown on this little Schoenhut, you can see that her forehead and nose has been retouched. There's a price difference between an all-original and a restored or retouched doll, so you should know what you're buying. While we're talking about this nice little Miss Dolly, she provides somewhat of a mystery. She was given to me in her original box by my dear friend Margaret Vitale. She's complete in her original union suit, as she would have come from the factory, and in a genuine Schoenhut box. Have you ever played that game, What's Wrong with This Picture? Well, here it is. The box is marked Character Girl, size 14 inches, model 14316B. Well, she isn't a character girl, she's Miss Dolly. And she isn't 14 inches, she's 15 inches. Yes, model 316 is Miss Dolly, but there's no model 14316. The only nearest size is 15316. I can't find any record anywhere of a model 14316 at all. One of life's little mysteries of the doll world. Now that you have your doll, how to dress her or him. These old magazine ads illustrate children's fashions of the period to use as a guide. But it's your doll, and Albert Schoenhut would have said, dress her as it pleases you. Of course, we'd all love to have factory original clothes for our Schoenhuts. The problem is that they're very expensive and they're also very hard to identify as the clothes were not tagged. If the clothes aren't made from a pattern designed for a Schoenhut, it's hard to get the right fit. Schoenhut bodies are a little stockier across the shoulders and around the neck than other dolls of that period and of that size. I can't tell you how many times I brought home a dress that I found at a doll show that was the right style and the right length, but didn't fit across the shoulders or around the neck. The 3 dresses shown here are reproductions by Karen Wilmot that I purchased on eBay. The doll in the center is showing the fancy slip some of the dolls were sold in. This paper doll and slip was created as a convention favor for a Schoenhut convention several years ago. Also shown is an original union suit, which many of the dolls came in. I found that my little 11-inch toddler model 107s can wear some bluette clothes styles. Again, it depends on the cut of the fashion. I'm not a fan of polyester clothes on antique dolls, but I love Bluette's skating outfit on the left. Some of my Schoenhuts are wearing polyester, only because they're waiting for something better to come along. I've been able to get some nice Schoenhut appropriate costumes from Florence and George, a sister company of Theriol's. You just have to measure carefully, look for period appropriate, and don't buy anything advertised for a slender doll, because Schoenhuts aren't. I don't have any myself, but I've been told that some styles of clothing made for 18-inch American Girl dolls will go very nicely on 17 to 19-inch Schoenhuts. Shoes are another problem. When you can find them, they're expensive, $150 to $200. Okay, so that's relatively inexpensive if compared to genuine Jumo shoes, but then so are Schoenhut dolls. As you can see by my dolls on the table, not all have the lovely original shoes, although some have very nice reproduction ones. The search continues. Of course, one of the first things you need to do, if you've not already done so, is to buy a copy of Carol Corson's book, Schoenhut Dolls, A Collector's Encyclopedia. It's out of print, but as of July 2022, Amazon has 1 new and 14 used copies available. Check eBay regularly as well. Sadly, Carol Corson passed away on March 29th of this year. I dedicate this seminar to her memory. She was a wonderful person and a thorough and dogged researcher who is greatly missed by all her friends in and out of the doll world. Thanks for joining me today and letting me share my dolls with you.
Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed part 2 of Barbara Stone's Schoenhut program. We'd like to thank Barbara for her continued support of our channel. If you are not yet a UFDC member, if you're thinking, well, I'd like to join, but I'm not sure I want to be a member of a club, well, I want you to know we have online clubs and members at large. You can go to ufdc.org and look up membership. And when you do, sign up. Be sure you tell them Karen sent you. Many, many thanks for your support of our channel. Until next time, take care and be well. We'll see you later.